Sorry, we're just all making sure that our phones are turned off. Good evening. Welcome to King's Own for our latest fans forum. Before we get into the business of the evening, can I just thank the players who've come this evening with serving canapes: Billy Twelvetrees, Greg Laidlaw, Richard Hibbard, Johnny May, and Charlie Sharple. So thanks, gents. We appreciate you being here this evening. So thank you to you all for joining us here this evening. We hope that you're going to find it enjoyable and also informative. Welcome also to those watching online via the live stream. We're going to be tweeting live updates as the evening goes by for those of you who aren't present. That'll be on the club's official Twitter feed, which is @Gloucester Rugby. We're also recording tonight's forum, so those who aren't able to make it, and even those of you who are here this evening, you can go home, and at some point in the next sort of 12-15 hours, we'll be loading it up online, so you can watch it back in case you missed any questions or answers. For those of you who've been here before, the format of the evening is going to be the same as in years gone by. We'll obviously give priority to questions which are posed from you who are here in person this evening. Ryan, he's going to be handling a roving mic. I've lost sight of Ryan, which is not a good start. He's at the back. So those of you, if you've got a question, just raise your hands. We'll get the mic to you as quickly as we possibly can. If there's two of you, raise it at the same time. We'll obviously ask one first and move quickly on to the second. We've also received a number of questions via email in the last few days. And for those of you who are watching online, remember that you can submit questions to us on the club's Twitter feed using the hashtag #GlossFansForum. We're not going to be taking a break. We thought we'll just carry on straight through. We're going to take as many questions as possible. If we take a 10-minute break, we'll lose some valuable talking time. So those of you who wish to refresh your drink or take a natural break, feel free to do so, but we'll carry on in the meantime. The aim is to wrap up in about an hour and a half, around about 8:30 p.m. Traditionally, we usually overrun. But enough from me. The people you really want to hear from are on my right, where we have on the far side, Club Chairman Martin St Quintin. In the middle, CEO Stephen Vaughan, and representing the playing department, Director of Rugby David Humphreys. So, without further ado, would anybody like to kick off proceedings? And I've just said to the gentleman, I always ask this every single year, and nobody puts their hands up. Everyone's very shy. So we'll take a question that's come in via email, and it's one for yourself, Martin, straight in at the deep end. It's just over 2 weeks since we were in this very room announcing you as the new club chairman. How have you found that first fortnight running the club?
It's been exciting. Feet have hardly touched the ground. We spent a lot of time down here at Kingsholm and a good amount of time also up at Hartbury. And I've been very encouraged by what I've found. I've obviously been around the club as vice chairman for a number of years, so it's not all new. But I've thoroughly enjoyed working with Stephen here and with David down at Hartbury. And yeah, it's been a great fortnight, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck in.
That's great. Thank you, Martin. Now, would anybody else ask the first question? Ryan, we have a taker in the middle there. I sound like an auctioneer.
Good evening. I was going to read out a list of all our former director of rugby's, but we'd have been here all night if I did that. The question I want to ask is, when we look at the clubs that are at the top of the league or coming up, their directors of rugby have been in place for quite some years. Can I ask our new owner, will he try to make sure that our now present director of rugby will be given time?
I like that question a lot.
Will be given time to put a good team together, and let's stop treating Gloucester like a football club that as soon as we get a few bad results, he's out through the gate. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, David, for that question. You're quite right. I mean, all sports clubs, not just rugby, but all sports clubs do benefit enormously from continuity in the coaching and playing departments. And I hope very much David's on a long-term contract. As you know, I very much hope David spends a long time at this club. He's made a big commitment. He was based in Northern Ireland for all those years, both as a player and as a coach, and that was very much his home. He made a big decision to move over here with Jane, his wife, and his children, and they're at school locally. He lives locally, and I think he's doing a terrific job. He's assembled a very, very high caliber group of coaches down at Hartbury. They're very well respected. They all get on very well with each other, and I very much hope David's here for a long time and builds a fantastic team and a great legacy. So, yeah.
I hope that answers your question and gets us off to a good start. Who's next? Okay, there's a question at the back. Thanks, Ryan.
Question to Martin. I think we all think that Kingsholm is a great stadium. Maybe a few areas now are looking a little tired. What are your plans for any redevelopment of the stadium?
I think Kingsholm is a great stadium, so there's no plans to relocate from Kingsholm at all. It is also looking a bit tired, so we have a number of plans, and Stephen's got a number of priorities that we're currently working through as to just how we should improve and refurbish Kingsholm. But it's certainly in need of a facelift in a number of areas, but we'll get around to that pretty soon.
I know the gents' toilets haven't
Okay.
We did have some shady-looking fella offering to send us a load of Dyson hand dryers, but we sent him packing. Okay, I've got a question coming online. It's one for yourself, David. The last time we did one of these forums was back in November 2014. At that point, you were only a few months into your tenure as director of rugby. The question is, we're now sort of halfway through your second season, and how do you feel that it's going for yourselves as a coaching group here at Gloucester Rugby?
Good evening, everybody. I think it's a difficult question to answer in a very short period of time. If you look back to 12 months ago, perhaps naively, when we looked at the squad that we had with the management team we assembled, I think probably like you, some of us sitting at the top table, expected quite fast results. We definitely improved throughout the course of the year. That was reflected in our performances in the Challenge Cup, and winning that was a highlight for us all, obviously. Where we are this year, I think since the start of the season, we have moved a long way forward in certain parts of our game. I think our set piece has improved beyond all recognition. You'll remember that 12 or 18 months ago now when we sat here, we talked about re-establishing what had made Gloucester such a strong team over the years that was based on their set piece. I think now when you come along and watch us, whether it's line out or scrum, the stats back it up. Now we've now the second best line out in the Premiership so far this year. Our scrum's not as high as that, but it's better than halfway, and we're moving in the right direction. So I think on the whole, while the results every week mightn't be to your liking, to our liking, to Martin's liking, to Steve's liking, we do believe as a team the basics are there that will allow us over the course of the next few months, few years hopefully, to build a team that can compete at the top end of the Premiership.
Okay, do we have a question from the floor? Ryan, we have a gentleman over on the right-hand side.
This is for you, David. Accept what you just said there, but are we? I know the forwards are really getting going, the set piece is working, but are we now not focusing so much on the backs? Because we've got a great set of backs in this club, and for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be working that well at the moment.
If I try and answer that in a historical context, 3 out of the last 4 years, we have finished 9th in the Premiership. We have, from where I was, from watching some of the tries this season, the players, we all know how good our backs are, but that wasn't delivering the success that we all wanted, that we now want. So with Laurie, with the coaching team, we sat down and set out a list of priorities, which we believe, a lot of you may disagree with, but what we believe are the fundamentals, or the foundations to having a very good team and a very good squad. That is around having a really strong set piece. It's around having a very strong kicking game. It's around having a very strong defence. Those are the 4 areas which I strongly believe we've done very well this year. We would all agree with you. We haven't scored the tries that we'd like to score, but we've created the opportunities. So we don't believe we can cover everything in this short period of time, but we all accept that we all believe the foundations are improving, and certainly this time next year, hopefully each part of that each part of that game will have improved again.
Okay. Stephen, there's a question coming for yourself. We're 6 months approximately after the end of Rugby World Cup, and obviously on the surface of it, 4 tremendous games here at Kingsholm, sell-out houses, etc. What was the sort of monetary result for the club from hosting Rugby World Cup games, and what has been the Rugby World Cup legacy here? There was a lot of talk about legacy. How's that transpired?
Evening, everyone. to answer your question, there was no real upside from a remuneration perspective around the World Cup at all for the club. It was more around the honour of hosting 4 games at Kingsholm, and why wouldn't you? One of the things that we did do well from the World Cup was some of the things around the stadium. So, you know, there were floodlights that were upgraded, the coaches' boxes are upgraded, and various pieces of infrastructure around the stadium which we could effectively have installed because of the upgrading needed to host the World Cup. So that was fantastic, but it was a venue hire agreement, and the way it worked was we had to prove that we were going to be losing business for those weeks. So, you know, as you know, we have conferences here, weddings and many other things, and we had to close down for business for 37 days. So it was effectively, you know, an expense against that. So there was no upside commercially from hosting the World Cup, but, you know, how great was it to have Kingsholm and Gloucester and the Shed and everything else beamed around the world, you know, and brilliant for, you know, people like Greg here as well, who kind of led Scotland out at Kingsholm as well. Just you know, there is no monetary value you can put next to those moments. So it was absolutely priceless, and I'm very pleased that we had the World Cup here. It really kept us on the map. To answer your question around legacy, there is no right answer around legacy. I mean, if you listen to Seb Coe talk about the Olympics and legacy, and you know, you ask anybody to back that up with stats, it's very difficult. We were very clear about what we wanted our legacy to be at Gloucester, and that was effectively to get more kids in the area playing rugby and playing sport, because that could be the next Johnny May or Billy Twelvetrees in the future, but also from a health benefit perspective as well, and also to engage with those people that came to Gloucester, to Kingsholm, that maybe hadn't been here before, and try and get them wearing cherry and white at games since. So on those 2 areas, we've beefed up our community team, you know, led now by people like Terry Fanalure and Adam Eustace and Helen Chew, and they do a fantastic job working ever closer with the playing department. And we're seeing over 15,000 kids a year now, and we're adopting clubs from a player perspective as well, and we've never worked closer with the community, and we're going to expand that still, for that to be our legacy around the World Cup. And from a commercial perspective, it's working with ER 2015 and the data that they give us to try and ensure that we use that data to get people coming back to Kingsholm who maybe weren't Gloucester fans before that. So that's effectively our legacy. And having worked on London 2012, you know, it's no good having a 10-point plan around legacy. You've got to keep it very simple and keep it very to the point, and we're making good tracks at the moment.
Thanks, Steve. Do we have a question from the floor? Ryan, there's a gentleman over here, 5 rows back. While Ryan's making his way around, David, a question just come in on Twitter for yourself from Lloyd Warren. Quite a thorny one, I would think, this one. And why do you think our players are not getting into the England squad at the moment? Thanks, Lloyd, wherever you may be. Yeah.
We've always said that the players that we want here are players who have ambitions to play at the highest level they can. And whether that's Greg playing for Scotland, or any of our players representing, as they did throughout the World Cup, right across the nations, I think that's a huge benefit for the club. From an English perspective, I think it's been disappointing. Obviously, Johnny's injury, which he picked up, has precluded him from being selected. Ben Morgan was in a similar situation last year with the nasty injury that he had. And look, selection comes from performing well at club level. We say it all the time. We all understand that if you want to be picked by your country, you've got to perform every week when you put on the Gloucester shirt, and there's no other way to put yourself into the selection for international team.
Thanks, David. Gentleman there.
Yes, a question for Martin. You said in an interview you gave about 3 weeks ago, and to paraphrase you, that there was nothing major broken at Gloucester, but there was some tweaking to be done. Would you like to talk through the tweaks, please?
Well, how long have you got? Because there's a whole range of small improvements that we need to make, but both in the playing department and down here, and Steve and I and David are working through all those different programs. I think it'd be inappropriate to sort of list them all, but the point I was really trying to make is that there's no big thing that really needs changing. The training department's excellent. The relationship with Hartbury's first class. I think the coaching group are excellent. We've already talked about that. I think the squad's strong and getting stronger. And Steve and his management team down here at Kingsholm are also excellent, and we know about the stadium, and the fans are the best in the country. So I don't think there's any really big things that need changing, other than we need to start winning on the pitch.
Okay. We've had a question come in from a gentleman called Alex Bound on Twitter. It's probably your area, Steve. I know our commercial director, Mike Turner, will be able to answer this one as well. The question is plain and simply, can we have our original club crest back, please?
Yeah, I could throw this one to Mike, but I won't. Look, the original crest, I assume you mean in the city coat of arms.
Yes.
By that, yeah, it does bring up, to be quite blunt with you, a number of issues around trademarking and merchandise sales, which mean that counterfeit can be particularly easy. And it was something obviously done a while ago to change the logo and change the brand. We'll all have our own opinions on brand, and I wasn't here, but I'm assuming at the time people were trying to be sympathetic to the Gloucester coat of arms and all the rest of it. But you know, Martin just alluded to tweaks and a lot of things to look at. It is one of the things that we're looking at. Is you know, what does the brand look like going forward? You know, it's a very emotive subject, this type of thing. You know, all of us have grown up supporting clubs, rugby, football, or whatever it is, and whenever something like that changes, it can be quite emotive. There are generally good reasons for it and well-intended reasons for it, and it's one of those things that we're going to look at. And one of the things we're going to talk about later was we're going to set up a fans consultation group this year, so we can look at some of these slightly thornier issues and get some real opinion from the horse's mouth, as it were, and maybe talk about options, and you know, with some really level-headed, balanced people who can give some opinions and understand both the business side of things and also that kind of more emotive side. So hopefully I've skirted around it enough not to give a proper answer. But no, genuinely, it is something that we're very aware of, and we understand, and we are going to look at it. But as I sit here, right now, we can't give you an answer because we've got to involve supporters, we've got to involve kit makers and suppliers and things like that. But it is on the agenda to be looked at, and I guarantee you we won't you know, move away from the question in the future, but we need to give it proper due time and consideration.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Ryan, question back left. We'll come to you in a second.
Good evening. A question for David, please. We've not had, in the past that I can recall, both a director of rugby and a head coach. Can you give me a brief outline of the different roles and responsibilities of yourself and Laurie, and so that I can understand the demarcation of your specific roles, please?
I can certainly give you my roles. I've just seen Laurie walk in at the back of the room here, so he might want to come up and join us. No, I think very simply, my responsibility is this side of the white line. Laurie's responsibility is what happens on the pitch. There's a grey area where we work very closely together, where we both have input into everything that happens within the professional team. My own view is that with the collective knowledge, the collective wisdom that we have now in our management team, there's not one area that we're saying, I'm solely responsible for, Laurie's solely responsible for. We've put together a coaching team that we believe can bring real value across all areas, so whether that's selection, whether that's player recruitment, whether that's our style of play. There's an ongoing discussions on a daily basis, and look, so far it's worked pretty well. We don't have the same ideas and everything. There's some pretty heated debates, as you would imagine, in an environment where you're winning and losing, where there's sometimes emotions are higher. People will disagree. That's part of the job that we do, but I think we've got a really good blend there, and so far it's worked very well.
Okay, Ryan, we have a gentleman at the front here, but in the meantime, a question for David that's coming online. How is recruitment progressing for next season's squad?
Recruitment's been going very well. Like so many of the areas, as Martin has talked about, there's a confidentiality element around it all. And as much as I would love to be able to sit here and share exactly what's going on, the fact that we're being beamed live and social media makes it very difficult. But I think the one thing that we can guarantee is that negotiations now are ongoing. Maybe a better way of explaining that is, in years gone by, there was a recruitment window which was generally from January through until March, April time. And that's when the main body of recruitment was done. Players moved, players became available. The reality is now it's a 12-month process, not just players that you're trying to retain, players that you're looking to recruit. You're trying to do some background when you're watching players here, maybe playing Super 15 with the competition that's kicked off last weekend. So it really is an ongoing process. The one thing in recruitment is that by the 1st of July, we can guarantee you that we'll have a squad in place that is stronger than the squad that we had this year.
That's great. Thanks, David. Question at the front.
A question for Martin. Congratulations on taking control of the club. You mentioned in some interviews last week or the other week when you took over that obviously going forward the club would continue to be run by a board as it would be as a limited company. Would you or have you ever considered board representation by supporters, as some clubs in different sports do through supporters trusts or similar organisations?
It's something we could look at. I mean, everybody on the boards they're all existing fanatical supporters of Gloucester, so we're not lacking in any passion for the club to succeed. But it's something we could look at by all means if it was appropriate. The board of directors that don't have a monopoly on all the good ideas around here at all.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Ryan's question at the front. Thank you.
This is a question for Martin. Okay. Why did you spend so much of your hard-earned money buying a professional rugby club?
I wish you'd asked me that when my wife wasn't at the back there. I love rugby and I love this club. I think it's a wonderful organisation. I'm very passionate about what we can achieve here, and I want to dedicate a lot of time and a lot of resource, which is another word for money, to make this a success. So that's the answer to that question.
Okay, Steve, question that's come in on email. Ryan, there'll be some people at the back after this. The club obviously announced that it acquired the old Cooper Cowan car dealership site over by the Lions Den a while ago. There's been a marquee on there, sort of temporary bar, etc. What are the long-term plans for that particular piece of land?
Yeah, there's probably a short-term and a long-term answer to it, but one of the things that we're looking at doing in the short term, which I think will be absolutely fantastic, as you know, Kingsholm, it's a wonderful stadium, it's a great location and all the rest of it, but what we have always struggled for is space, whether it's car parking or what have you. That kind of third of an acre right next to the shed there, opening out onto the road, gives us a great opportunity to really engage more with supporters. So effectively, one of the plans is, as we go into next season, will be to if you can imagine, we're going to move the terracing further out where you enter the ground. We're going to knock down a wall or two, make good the floors, and we're going to turn that into effectively a fan village, a fan zone. I suppose the nearest I could suggest it's similar to would be Harlequins. If you look at the back of Harlequins, where they have a real great bit of entertainment after the games there, different food options, different drink options, a community zone, places for the kids to go, people to meet. So I want to make it a real destination for people to go and give them other options. It's going to take a bit of work to do that, but I think once it's done, it's going to open up a great piece of land there for us, and we can really make sure that we turn it into a fantastic area for supporters to meet, stay after the game and enjoy themselves. So that'll be the first thing that we do, and then long term, obviously the world's our oyster. It goes down on that list of things to look at. It's a nice space, and you know, who knows? Hopefully, if we get to a point where we're busting at the seams, you know, when we, you know, the results improve, then who knows? Capacity could be an issue. We might look at those types of things. But until then, it's something we want to give back to the fans really, and make a real destination for the supporters.
Thanks, Steve. I believe we have some questions at the back there.
Yeah, I have a question for Stephen. Well, it's two actually. First of all, I find the website very difficult, and I'm not the only one that I've heard having problems with the website. Can that be looked at and improved upon, made more simple to use? And the second question is, My family is a vegetarian, and we can't get vegetarian food in this place. And it's, you know, we'd like to eat here, but we just can't because there's nothing like that at all.
Okay, no problem. With regards to the website, I hope that's not a bad tradesman blaming his tools there for finding it difficult. But no, we absolutely agree with you. Our website is very functional. It works. You get good rugby information from it. We try and do as much as we can on a match day with the Twitter feeds and the various things that come through, like they do on Radio 5 Live, and Duncan and Tom work very hard on that. But we've got a very talented brand manager called Fiona, who one of her pieces of her remit at the moment is to actually spec out what a new website offering might look like, along with ticketing and CRM and those types of things as well, which now we've got a little bit of kind of security about where we're going forward, we can now start planning these projects. So I do agree with you, it's not perfect. We'd like to think it's workable without a shadow of a doubt, and the improvements have been made to it. But bear with us, it will definitely be getting looked at along with brand and other things, and try and make it a little bit more kind of state of the art. And hopefully, as part of those fans consultation groups, we can find out a little bit more about what's important to supporters as well, because obviously there's an element of expecting people to you know, be all into the rugby or all into the community or into the commercial pieces. It'd be nice to understand a little bit more about that. With regards to the vegetarian situation, I'll have to take that away with me, I'm afraid. It's no good telling you that, you know, we do pie and chips, but she can just have chips, because that's not a very good answer. So we will, although it is factually correct. So if you can maybe give Ryan or myself a quick nudge after with an email address, telephone number, we'll feed that back into the catering department. I expect there isn't a huge demand in you know, in the stadium, but it doesn't mean that we can't do something. So we'll take that away with us.
Just to back up what Steve was saying there about the website, we are aware of the fact that we last had a redesign back in mid-2012, so the design is about three and a half years old now, and we're conscious that at the time there was some really, really good stuff that we rolled out as part of that release, and obviously 3.5 years has elapsed, time moves on, and obviously there are different things that we'd like to be doing with it, but it's one of those things that you can't rip apart in the middle of a season. So as we said, Fiona's our brand manager, she's looking into that at the moment, but it's one of those things that will change in the close season. Okay. Questions coming online from a gentleman called Ashley Gibbons. I think it's probably one that fits between yourself and Martin, Steve, and it's quite a good one. The club has made a profit for the last 5 years in a row. How is the club going to sustain profitability with the ever-increasing salary cap, in brackets, assuming we're spending up to it, question mark?
Is that me?
I'm happy to handle it. I mean, the club has made a small profit every year for the last 5 years. We don't actually need to make a profit. We just want to break even. So we're not. If we do make a profit, we've never paid any profits back to shareholders in the form of dividends or anything like that, and we've certainly no intention of doing that in the future. So the game plan here is to maximise our revenue in terms of sponsorship and TV rights and central distribution from the RFU and all the other things we can do around the stadium, and then spend up to the salary cap in order to put the best possible team on the pitch. And we would hope we'd be able to do that by breaking even or making a small profit, but we certainly won't be budgeting to make a big profit, because we don't need or want to do that.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Do we have another question from the floor? Ryan, right next to you, lady there.
This question's already been addressed vis-à-vis the website, but I was wondering whether it's possible, or if there's any sort of contractual or privacy reasons, why it wouldn't be possible for us to keep the fans updated in regards to things like injuries, because we very often we see an injury during a match, and then it's all silent. So we'd be very interested to know if it's possible for us to be kept updated on progress, etc. Players that have been brought in that suffering injuries are waiting to see when they're likely to make their club debut.
I'll try and answer that. It's a difficult question to answer in some ways, simply because, as you can imagine, like all of you, medical records and medical history, there is a confidential element to that as well. traditionally the Gloucester as a club have not disclosed very much about players, so it isn't just a case of over the last year, whatever. I think traditionally the clubs in England do not disclose a huge amount around a player's injury. There are not regular updates. I think it's more a case when a serious injury occurs like Johnny's, that we do try and update you without trying to put any prognosis on it, because as we've all seen, there's players who you immediately think might be ruled out for 6 months and they're back in 2 months, and vice versa. So it's a real difficult balance between not giving our opponents an advantage for the weekend ahead by saying this player's ruled in, he's ruled out. So there's these little sort of side games going on as well. But we do try update as much as we feel we can without compromising what's happening in the club and for the player.
Just to expand upon that, Mike is here from the Citizen, our local rugby writer, and I'm sure he'd be the first to admit that at every midweek media session where we preview the forthcoming game, the question gets asked either by himself or BBC Radio Glasgow. It's always put to David, how are your injuries coming into this weekend? And of course, post-match, if something occurs out on the pitch, again, it's a question that David often has to field. So when the question is asked, we do try and provide the information as best we possibly can, as David has just outlined. Okay. Any more questions from the floor? Right just in front of you there.
We all had a vision where we might want to be at the end of this season, and whereas I'm a glass half full guy and I think we made considerable progress, what will we deem a successful year now?
We'll all have a crack at this, will we?
It will get higher as we go along.
One of the mantras that Laurie has preached, that we've all preached since we first arrived here, is improvement week on week, year on year. So I'll start off by saying we have got to be better than 9th. I will then qualify that by saying that we know this club, we know this group of players, we know the management, we know the people that are here. That's not acceptable to be just slightly better than that. We believe this club and the players and the management, we want to be competing in the top European competition. So what that means is we've got to be top 6 or we've got to win the Challenge Cup. So that really was the goal we set out for ourselves this season. And look, I think it's fair to say that over the course of the last month almost sums up being a supporter of Gloucester, being involved with Gloucester. 2 weeks ago before the Saracens game, on the back of 2 great victories, we were going to be top 4. After the Saracens game, it was the world that ended. We were going to be involved in the relegation dogfight. As always, the truth is somewhere in between. We believe, as we've talked about, we're improving all the time. We are 3 points away from sitting in 3rd place in the league. That's the competition we're in this year. On the bare statistics, I think we've played 20 games. We've won 13. We've lost 1. We've drawn 6. It's not as a... So what did I say? Sorry, yes. Sorry. I'm not very good at stats. You can tell who knows numbers better than I do. But no, so 1-13, drawn 1, lost 6. So I think for me, we want to be involved in the Champions Cup next season.
No, I think that sums it up. I think that would be good progress. Kind of 18 months down the road from when we made some fairly wholesale changes within the coaching department. David was aware when we spoke initially that Gloucester, it really is a top 6 club in everything that it does, and we've got to get the team back into the top competition. And once we're in there consistently, that's when we can start looking at the other numbers that are slightly lower than 6. But I think that's what we're all striving for this year. And if you talk around the rugby fraternity, people feel that Gloucester is a big club. What we don't want to be is that sleeping giant, because it's a bit patronising. So we want to get ourselves back to our rightful place.
Well, for me, I think I would like us to win the European Challenge Cup, retain the European Challenge Cup, and I'd like us to finish in the top 6 as well. So I don't really see it as an either-or. I think we should do both. Yeah.
But I do think in the context of the league, if you look now, and it's easy to say, but you take Bath as the example. Last year, right at the top, playing some of the best rugby in Europe, 12 months on, rise off first phase, and that's a sign of an uncertainty around your system. I think now, particularly over the last few weeks, it's got better and better and better, and we're now a hard team to play against. It will be tested this week because we're playing against Wasps, who in the last 2 games against top 4 teams have scored over 100 points. So, but we're very confident that our defence is is moving in the right direction, and it is without a doubt the basis of a successful team. Teams that have been successful, whether it's the Premiership, whether it's in Europe, whether it's World Cup, a huge amount of that is built around how they defend. They're very difficult to play against. Because of the pressure that creates, that then means that sometimes balls turned over, and that's when those opportunities you're talking about in counter-attack, that's when they arise, and that's with the players that we have in our back three, we will capitalise on them. But it's only one part of the game, but as we tried to set the start of the night, it's an important part of the game, and one that we believe is absolutely critical to us being successful long term.
Okay, Steve, quite a thorny one now, and I'm going to paraphrase a couple of emails that have come in. Not so very long ago, around about the time of Rugby World Cup, there were lots of headlines regarding salary cap breaches and potential breaches marring the game. Now, Gloucester as a club obviously came out with quite a firm statement to confirm that we were not breaking the salary cap. A couple of others maintained a dignified silence, shall we say. How confident are we as a club that the game can be properly administered in terms of keeping everybody playing by the same set of rules? And how does rugby avoid becoming like soccer and there being a huge gulf between the haves and the have-nots?
Thanks for that, Duncan. Well, firstly, yes, we absolutely we're never in breach of salary cap, and it's going forward. We never see anything like it, and I don't think we will. Your third part of the question, Duncan, was about competition around the salary cap. Look, a salary cap is something where you can go to if you wish to. You don't have to, and clearly there will be some element of linkage between the two. I think the reason why I think it will still be a very competitive league like it is now, and to David's point, there's nothing splitting a number of clubs at the moment between finishing third and eighth, effectively. The central TV revenues have also gone up as well as the salary cap. So, when we have these conversations around the board table, there are always reasons. If the salary cap goes up, it's because central income and distributions have also gone up as well. And that's a very important fundamental part of the salary cap that allows the team that's in 12th or 11th or 10th the ability to still go up at the same gradient as a team that might be in first, second or third. So it isn't just about the sugar daddy coming in and putting in that extra amount. It is a kind of considered approach from the clubs with regards to how central distributions have improved around the new RFU heads of agreement, the new television deals, the new European rights agreement. So there are a number of reasons why the salary cap has gone up. Outside of the salary cap, there are credits and marquee players and things, and we have to let that competition go. But I think the difference between the kind of haves and have-nots and the salary cap going up, I think perception would tell you that it makes the richer richer and the poorer poorer, but the reality of it is it actually kind of all moves up at the same level.
Thanks, Steve. Ryan, there's a lady on the third row here had a question. If you just raise your hand for Ryan so you can see you. Thank you.
I'm sorry about this, but we seem to have moved on a little bit since I put my hand up. But Martin did allude to hopefully winning the Challenge Cup this season. And I would just like to raise one point for all of the season ticket holders that were here last season when we supported the team, home and away. And on the last day of the season, when they brought all the cups out and they gave them to Player of the Season, what have you, I would have thought that the players would have paraded that cup around for us to see, or it would have been there for us to have had our photographs taken or just to see it. But instead, it was up here having its photograph taken with 1873 and their guests. Well, we don't mind them having it pre-match, we don't mind them having it half-time, but don't you think that with our loyalty to this club, we deserve to have it at the end of the game?
Yes, we are.
Can you please ensure that if we are good enough to win it this season, that this will never happen to us again, that you will ensure we will see it and we will be treated a little bit fairly?
That's a yes.
Let's jump in a second. Sorry, just to point out, we did actually have the Challenge Cup that was being displayed over at the Gate 1 entrance at the shed. We had we had quite a lot of queues and a lot of people doing it. So apologies if the communication wasn't as good, but there were many people queued up and had the photo taken with the players and the cup, but maybe that was a communication thing, so apologies for that.
But also, it's all the more reason, the more people that were there creating the queue, the more reason to bring it onto the pitch, to take it, for the players to take it around, because they were all standing, bless their hearts, after a very hard game, waiting for everything to be set up. It was an ideal opportunity for them to go to all parts of the stadium and say, those of you that missed it before, and like us coming in on the bus, and it's not a very regular bus, so we just have time to get off it, come in. We didn't see it over there. We were hoping to see it at the end of the game. So it's just putting a little bit more thought into it for people that don't have cars or good parking and things like that, really, isn't it?
It'd be a nice problem to have. We'll take care of it.
Okay, I've got a question for David, which has come in online. It's actually a couple of questions. Well, the first general question is how is the atmosphere within the squad at the moment, and that's been provoked by the first question, which is that Jeremy Thrush didn't appear to be too happy when he was replaced against Leicester. Then he was missing for the next couple of games. Then in his post-match at Saracens, didn't appear too happy with life. And the question is everything happy within the camp?
Look, to deal with the Jeremy Thrush one, I think it was Duncan actually spoke to me the weekend that he didn't play after that, thinking there was some issue that he didn't play. Was that a widely held view among? So just to set the record really straight, 18 months ago we're negotiating with Jeremy Thrush to bring him to Gloucester. Part of that negotiation involved allowing him a weekend at home for a family wedding back in New Zealand. So this was negotiated 18 months ago. Coincidentally, it was the
Thanks. David, you just mentioned that some players were kicking the heels at the weekend when they're not involved in the game. Has there been any discussions in Premiership Rugby about having a proper A-League rather than just playing 4 games or 5 games before Christmas? How about having a proper A-League when, thinking about last Saturday, the first team are at home, the A team could be away at Newcastle and vice versa. Any thoughts on whether Premiership Rugby have had any thoughts on that sort of system?
I know for a fact it's a big, Steve might be able to back that up, but certainly in terms of meeting with PRL, we had an academy review last week or the week before, and again, that was a big discussion. How do we get our players, not just players in the squad, but some of our young players, meaningful game time? And you're absolutely right. In an ideal world, you would have a 15 to 20 A game league, which would allow you then to play players who aren't part of your senior 23 on a weekend, but also some of those young players who are at the top end of your academy, to give them experience and really try and judge them once they step up that level. But you got to qualify it by saying this time 12 months ago, if you remember, we had a huge number of injuries in our squad. We couldn't sustain even the small number of A-team games at that time without having to dip into Hartbury, into Cinderford, to try and get players at very short notice to fulfil the fixture. And that doesn't help, because if you're pulling players in from some of these clubs who have never trained as a team before, it doesn't give those young players the opportunity to perform in a good team, in the right environment. And you're judging players, their careers, you're judging whether you're going to keep them on, you're making contractual decisions not quite on an even playing field. So it's a huge challenge for the game, and it's not just in England, it's a challenge throughout the world, or certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, in Ireland, in Scotland, Wales here, as to how we get those players enough game time to allow them to develop, but at the same time understanding the attrition rate with injuries to allow us to make sure that we get a team out here every week that competes.
Okay, thanks, David. Martin, question that's come in for yourself. It's a similar question to one that's been asked at previous fans forums. Are there any plans to increase the capacity at Kingsholm? And has any thought been given in order to try and fill Kingsholm on a more regular basis with regard to dropping ticket prices?
Okay, there's two questions there. In terms of developing the stadium to increase capacity, we'd be delighted to do that, but there's no point at all doing it until we can fill the ground on a consistent basis as it stands. So the minute we get sellouts at 16,200 for a good number of games in the season, we will be very quickly increasing the capacity of the stadium. But until that time, it's vanity and doesn't achieve anything. So we won't be doing anything. But we're going to work very hard to try and fill the stadium every week so we can increase the capacity. The second half of your question is the way to fill the stadium by reducing ticket prices. I don't think that's really the way forward. We were always very conscious, and I've been involved myself over the last few years, about increasing ticket prices at the absolute bare minimum, purely inflationary. And Stephen does some cross-checking with all the other Premiership clubs of what they charge in their gold and silver and bronze and standing and the various areas of their ground. And we are very, very competitive. I think if you saw the comparisons, you'd be surprised at what some of the other grounds are charging, and I still think Kingsholm's excellent value. So I don't think reducing the prices is the way forward.
Thank you, Martin. Ryan, this gentleman, again, about on the fifth row there.
Thank you. There was talk a few years ago of doing away with demotion from the Premiership and promotion to it. I think that was on the US model, where it was thought that it would be better for the business model and investment, and possibly people like David could experiment more with players. Is that likely to reappear? Have you got any thoughts on whether it would be a good thing?
I guess that's the question about ring fencing, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, we've had these discussions. Effectively, that would be a franchise model where you would expand the league, so arguably bring in two clubs that could meet a minimum standard criteria to ensure that the strongest clubs were in that top flight division, and you would close it off for either for good or for a number of years. There has been discussion around it. I think that it's a very emotive one, to be quite frank with you. There are good business reasons to do things like that. If you're a club that wants to not have the spectre of relegation hanging over you, whilst you can invest in your academy and your infrastructure and all those things, and make the product better in the future and make it a stronger league. I think it also brings downsides where you can have a league that can have a lot of dead rubbers. If a team can't go down, and you might have 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th places for 7 or 8 weeks that haven't got anything to play for, which can be a problem. And also from a commercial perspective, you've got to ensure that if you're adding more fingers into the pie, as it were, that you can deal with that, and it's not going to affect the kind of equilibrium from a financial perspective. I think where we would be on this is there's two things. I think with the Premiership and the Championship, one of the key issues that we have is that they're not governed by the same body. So for argument's sake, if Premiership Rugby was in charge of Championship and PRL, the Aviva Premiership, it would be a much easier conversation, I expect. But the RFU obviously runs the Championship downwards. My personal opinion is that the Championship should be first past the post rather than playoffs, because this is not because I just want another sellout against Bristol, but they have been the best team in the Championship consistently for a number of years, and in my opinion it goes down to the end of the season playoff system, which I think is quite difficult for clubs. You could argue that that's the same in the Premiership, and that when and Gloucester were the first ones to take the brunt of that, if you remember. But my personal thoughts are that there is quite a gulf between your average Premiership club and Championship club. There are only a certain amount of Championship clubs that would want to and be able to come up to the Premiership anyway. So I think that getting that first past the post is probably the best thing. I don't think the expanded league will happen just yet. I think it will probably come back on the table in the next few years, and if the finances hold up and the Championship clubs that are affected are comfortable with that, then it'll be voted in. But what we can't forget about this is for something to get voted in, the Premiership clubs can't decide that to do this. This would be a piece where we would have to get absolute buy-in from the Championship clubs. It would then have to go to the RFU Council, etc., etc. So don't think for one second it would just be a flippant conversation and happen. This would have to go through a lot of loops to happen, because it actually has an impact on a number of divisions down as well.
Thanks, Stephen. David, got two questions have come in on Twitter. They're fairly similar. The first is from James Eastwood, who says, are there ever contractual reasons for player rotation? If not, why have we struggled for consistency in selection? Which is followed up by Adam Seymour, who said, surely the standard of the league means that we need our strongest 15 out each and every week.
Selection is incredibly subjective. If we asked everybody in the room to write down their starting team, that's the reality of it. We all have our own view of what the strongest team is. When we see the team that Gloucester put out every week, you'll agree with it some weeks, you won't agree with it other weeks. To answer the questions, no, there's no contractual obligation in anybody's contract to pick them or not pick them. It tied in a little bit to Steve, the point you made there. If you close the league and bring in more teams, the problem for us as a squad is you've got to increase your squad. You add 4 more really competitive games into this league with players playing international rugby. There's already huge question marks about player welfare, about how we get players through a season as it is. So for me, selection every week comes down to one thing. Laurie, myself, pick the team that we believe will win on the weekend. If we don't pick that, I won't be sitting here for too long. So, sometimes as much as people get pretty wound up, have strong views on what our team is, we believe that across the course of the season, we are picking a team to win in that weekend, but we're also picking a team to ensure that come April, May time, we still have enough of our key players fit and available to make sure that we're competing in those games that will allow us to win the Challenge Cup or make sure that we're in the top 6. So, look, selection is a wonderful thing. We can all sit and debate it all night, but that's part of, as I said, basically we're picking a team to win.
Thanks, David. Do we have another question from the floor? Ryan, there's a gentleman here, 4 rows back.
Just going back to the question you've got about selling out, I know that Graham Spring does a very good job, and he does tell us at half time what the sales are of tickets. So we're looking at an average of anywhere from 5,000 just under. Are there any short-term plans, and I don't think it's to do with the price of the tickets, any short-term plans to raise that and get more sellouts?
Sorry, to raise?
To raise the attendance.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm here. Yeah, of course. I mean, to Martin, I won't go back through everything Martin just said, but we are, in my opinion, very, very good value for money in terms of what we provide on a match day here at Kingsholm. And having travelled the width and breadth of the country for the last 3 years to all the other stadia, I mean his hand on heart, I wouldn't swap Kingsholm for any other stadium. I genuinely mean that. So I think it's decent what we do here. From a commercial perspective, there are obviously a number of things that we try. First and foremost, we have to be very, very mindful of our members. The very obvious thing to do is to try and get more sellouts, is to just slash prices across the piece. That doesn't work if you're a member. Absolutely doesn't work, and it shouldn't work, because these are the people that give us their hard-earned money at the start of the year. Okay, direct debit now, interest-free and all this, but they commit to the club and they show us their confidence and support early doors. And the last thing I'm going to do is make it more beneficial to non-members to come to the club from a financial perspective. So, and that's something that we're going to try and build on, as we have with the members' days and various bits. There are a number of things that we can do around, and we discussed this quite a lot, around how can we get to fill a stadium. Let's say for argument's sake, we say there are 50 things, whether it's a new PA system or, tweak that or change the toilets or put more hand dryers in or all the rest of it, a new pitch, whatever it might be. I know full well, this isn't speculation, that after a little while you get used to that. You get bored of that. We've done that now. What's next? The new fan zone, that's all very well and good. The reality is, you've got to get a team that wins on the pitch. That's what sells out stadia. I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever. You can go back to the year dot and any sport that's ever been played. You've got to. I mean, we can fill the ground with thousands of free kids like some clubs do. I'm talking about. But we do have a lot of kids here. We have a lot of stuff that goes on well with the community. But our investment has to be balanced. But I think it would be very churlish, and I think you'd be disappointed with us if we said, look, we're not serious about getting a team on the pitch here. That will mean that, I'm saying to Martin and Martin's saying to me, by jingo, Steve, I think we need to look at expanding here, and that's what we really want. But you can do anything. You have the best marketing on the planet. You've got to get a team that wins on the pitch, because I know what it's like. We know when we're in the top 6 in the Challenge Cup and the Champions Cup. I can tell you within 100 of how many season tickets we'll sell that next year. And I can tell you exactly what the average yield will be within 10 pence of our match tickets for that year, based on our hardcore support and our floating vote. So and you can try many things, but got to get a team that wins on the pitch, and that will bring people back in.
Thanks, Stephen. I think we had a question on this side somewhere. Yes, in the middle there. In the meantime, we had a tweet from at Charlie Sharples, whose question was, did everyone enjoy their canapes?
Charlie was good. Charlie was good.
I think the general feel about Charlie was that they were very nice, but the service was a bit slow. Okay, gentleman in the middle.
With regards to attendance, what's the reasoning behind increasing the price of the tickets on the day before and the day of a match? Surely if you want to increase the attendance, just keep the price as it is and get your floating John off the street to come down and buy a ticket on the match day.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost a paradoxical question, really. It's the other way around. Somebody might see it as putting prices up 24 hours before the game. We actually see it as discounting for weeks and weeks and weeks before the last knockings, as it were. For us, it helps if we can get people into the stadium. If we know the numbers that come into the stadium early, we can plan for stewarding, we can plan for many other things, and we can budget and forecast. Nick knows how many bar staff he's going to need and all the rest of it. So there's a genuine business reason for us to try to get people in as early as we can. So our pricing is our match day pricing, but we put an early bird discount in an offer to try to get people to commit early. And there are a number of reasons why people won't commit early. It might be weather, it might be Six Nations, it might be many things. But the mass majority of our support, it does not turn up on the day. It has booked its ticket on by a Thursday night for the Saturday. So it's not a persecution piece. It's more trying to offer people better value for allowing us to plan better for a match day.
Okay, Ryan, there's a lady here on the 4th row. Thanks, Ryan.
On a lighter note,
Yeah.
on a lighter note, about the cups, you know, that you charge £1 for. I don't mind, but I'm listening to people for and against. I have 20, I collect them, I love them. And then when I want a free drink, I'll bring them back. And I've got £20, haven't I? To spend on drinks. So it's great. Could you actually clarify what it's all about, and you know, to give, so I can tell people the real story, because I get into arguments with them.
Are you that woman I see walking around with 20 pint glasses? I've never seen your face before. It's usually look, you know the role of a chief exec at a club where we try to be self-sustainable and profitable and trying to regenerate money for the playing department. It is another way of trying to raise revenues in a way that shouldn't, hopefully, not everyone will like it, I mean, but in a way that hopefully is okay for people. You know, we tried to be a bit cute around it and change the cups and have John O'Fower on it last week and whoever on it the week before and make it a bit of a collector's item. It's very widespread now. If you go to international games, or if you go to Northampton or wherever else, it's widespread. We think they're quite cute. A lot of people like them. We get a lot of good response, but not everybody will. If you change anything, if you change the colour carpets in here, somebody will have an issue with it. That's fine. We get that. We're all different, but it is to try and raise some revenue, and also a big piece as well is to cut down on cleaning costs. Before we brought these in, on a Monday morning here after a Saturday game, they were just smashed plastic glasses for the whole piece. A, it's not very hygienic, and B, it's a cost to us which we'd hopefully not have to pay. So we hope that the eco cups, as they're called, are more good than bad, although I appreciate they're not everybody's cup of tea, if you excuse the pun. Yeah.
On a commercial note, Steve, prior to the World Cup, the club took the bold step of opening a shop down at Gloucester Quays. How's that paying off? Is that proving to be a success at the moment?
Yeah, in fact, it's been phenomenal. The shop, we signed a new deal with X-Blades, a new kit provider. We did a deal with Superdry as well for various garments, and we were very fortunate to get a 2,000 square foot retail experience in Gloucester Quays. And if anybody's been down there, you'll see the step change that's given us. You've got to have a club shop at the stadium for match day and various other bits, but it's been fantastic. And in fact, our sales have almost trebled year on year, because we've got a very busy shopping centre down there. You've got that footfall going past as well. It's a much nicer retail experience there as well. And if you go down to Gloucester on a Saturday before a game, you'll find our supporters milling around there having a coffee and all the rest of it. So it's been great. And actually next year, it just brings me on to another point actually, if you don't mind, Duncan. Next year will be our, this was one of the kind of announcements we wanted to make, it will be our 125th year at Kingsholm next year. We first played here in 1891. I'm led to believe there were no Eco Cups back then. But we are, to celebrate 125 years, we're going to be embarking on a number of things which we really want the supporters behind and to get involved with. So we're going to set up a working party, which is going to have players in, former players, people from the Heritage Committee, people like Melk, who's sat down there in row 5, and supporters as well. We want people to get behind it and to discuss what we can do to celebrate our 125th year. Things like playing Legends games, taking that team around the clubs around Gloucestershire. 55 clubs in Gloucestershire that are very dear to our hearts, who we're trying to work with. How can we work closer with them and take Gloucester on the road to those types of events as well. We want to raise more money for charity, and we've got a Pied Piper Day on Saturday as well, if you're not aware. And we're also going back into the clothing. We're going to look at developing a range of clothing around the 125 year, including a new playing strip for next year, a third strip. So don't worry, don't panic. Cherry and white is the key for the home strip. Actually, in 1891, as Malcolm will point out, we actually played in a almost reminiscent of the Richmond kit. It's a kind of red, amber and black kit. Very nice, very striking actually. We're going to be producing a new kit next year, which you're all going to love. And we're going to be embossing it with local clubs and all the rest of it. So we really want to make a big go of 125 years at Kingsholm, because there aren't many clubs that can do that. So when we set up this fan consultation group, we'll be asking you a little bit about what you'd like to do in 125 years at Kingsholm and what that looks like from a merchandising perspective as well.
Our latest tweet has just come in from the Gloucester Hartbury ladies side. Not so much of a question. Well, it is a question. They're saying, are you looking forward to seeing us playing versus Loughborough this Saturday after Gloucester played Wasps? So let's give them the plug they're looking for. Our ladies team are going to be playing on here on the hallowed turf at Kingsholm. 5:30. They're playing Loughborough after we finish our game against Wasps. I hope you're happy, ladies. Does anybody else here have a question from the floor? Right in front of you there, Ryan.
As all Gloucester supporters know, in previous years, we've had players who've come to Gloucester for the pension. But the recent signings we've had over the last couple of years, like Richard, Greg and Hookie, I can honestly say they've played for the shirt and they've played for the club, which is absolutely great. The question to David is, obviously you're looking at bringing in new players. How do you persuade players to come and play for Gloucester, for the shirt, for the club, and not for their pension?
I think it's not easy, but one of the key things that we talk about when we're sitting down to recruit players, very quickly how good a player they are. We'll have all watched them play for whatever team that they've been part of the last few years. But the key where I think recruitment has moved on hugely in the past, maybe even 2 or 3 years, is rather than just rely on making those recruitment decisions based on what you see, it's about meeting those players. It's about sitting down with them, explaining where we're trying to go to. You can imagine sitting down trying to sell Gloucester at this minute in time. It's not an easy sell compared to a Saracens, who have been very successful at the top. But what you're selling them is a vision of where this club can get to, with the players that it has, and it's bringing some quality people into the group. And I think that's been the case here for the last 2 or 3 years. The one thing I would say on that is that when you look at the playing squad that we have, the average age of our squad is incredibly young, mid-20s. If you look across rugby, for some reason, the successful teams in rugby have all had an average age of 30 plus. So part of what we've got to recruit is a little bit of experience into our squad. That will bring some extra leadership. It'll bring players in some of the games, like the Leicester game recently, where we should win the game comfortably. It's a tight game. It's people who've been there and know how to win those games. So recruitment isn't about one thing. It's about making sure that you're bringing in good players as well as and good people too. And Duncan asked a little bit about the atmosphere around our squad. For me, the biggest recruitment tools we have are the players that play here. Any player who we're trying to recruit won't just talk to me. He'll talk to people who've been here. He'll talk to people who are here currently. What's the setup like? It's what they say will ultimately influence whether players come. And that's why our players, it's important that we create an environment here where players don't want to leave. Inevitably, in any squad, there will be players who come in, players who leave, but we want to create an environment where our key players are here for that to provide that stability and here for a long time.
Thanks, David. We've got a tweet in from James Barker who, Steve says, I love my vast collection of pint cups. So there's one happy customer sat at home there. Question, Steve, this might be for yourself, might be for Martin. Are there any plans to help improve the facilities for disabled supporters? Number 1, parking. Number 2, seating areas out of the rain.
I'll take that. We had some changes that were forced upon us during Rugby World Cup, where we had to make a few changes. Parking is difficult at Kingsholm, full stop. But I know Sean Roberts, our operations manager, is looking at the moment as to how we can improve facilities for disabled people within the framework that we've got at the moment. Duncan, I don't have absolute detail on me, but I'm happy to deal with that individual directly. But
that's fine. We've got the Twitter address, so we can contact them directly. Question for David. A couple of directors of rugby recently, not yourself, it has to be said, have been very, very critical of the way referees have been officiating the games. And it seems to be more and more of a recurring problem with 1 or 2 officials, apparently. What are the methods for yourself and the other coaches to give feedback on the officiating at Gloucester games?
The starting point for any discussion around officiating is that the game wouldn't go ahead without them. The reality is rugby now is an incredibly technical game, and at any breakdown, at any set piece, if a referee wants to, he can give a penalty, and generally speaking, the assessor sitting in the stadium, in the stadium somewhere, will agree with him, because technically the referees now are very good. There is, as you said, some of the direct DORs have referred to in the media, there is a process in place which has tried to bring some transparency to how referees are reviewed, and it has been very beneficial, I think, for the referees in particular, but also from a coaching point of view. It gives us an idea of how referees make decisions, what they focus on. It's about them, but ultimately what you're talking about has been put in place to improve the standard of refereeing. And as I say to many people, anybody who complains about the standard of refereeing in this league should look around some of the leagues elsewhere in Europe, and I can assure you that the quality of refereeing in this league is vastly superior to what others experience on a week-to-week basis.
Thanks, David. Ryan, gentleman down the front here. Gentleman in the hoop shirt there.
Question for Stephen and Martin. Following on from your comments about generating revenue and also your comments about Kingsholm, could you ever foresee the day when we're sat here in the Mitsubishi Stadium, as happened at David's former home?
It's a good question. I guess my role as chief exec is to look at all angles of revenue, and if I just open it up a second, the macro environment in rugby now has seen a number of very wealthy entrants over the last few years. There's what's happened at Wasps, where they're now, without divulging in the market, they're extremely aggressive in the market. You've got obviously Bath, Bruce Craig, and Nigel Ryan, the guys at Saracens. You've got the likes of Worcester with very healthy benefactors, and the list goes on. Bristol, if they come up, could usurp everybody. So you go through the 7, 8, 9 clubs now that are all very much at the top table when it comes to having revenue or cash to fall upon. You know, I absolutely see my job squarely as ensuring that we're in the best position possible to remain here for another 125 years and to remain a stable business. So my answer would be I wouldn't rule out a stadium naming rights. I wouldn't rule out a naming rights on anything if it was the right business. But, you know, let's be quite clear about this. You know, if we called this for your argument's sake, you know, the Mitsubishi Stadium or whatever else, there isn't a person here that wouldn't refer to it as Kingsholm, I'm pretty sure. As far as you go, I mean, you know, Southampton moved to St Mary's. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's something, the Friends Provident or whatever it is. So, you know, there is an element of, you know, commercial reality about everything that we do. And, you know, to be quite frank, if it was to, you know, speed up putting a new pitch down, or it was to give David another marquee player, and it was potentially selling the stadium naming rights, I'd have to think really hard about that, because, you know, we're all here for a certain amount of time, and I want my legacy to be that, you know, whenever I leave the club or I'm asked to exit the club, it'll be one of them, won't it? That you know, I wasn't the guy that was there when we finished 5th, 9th and 9th, you know, and there's a lot of things there that drive that. So, yeah, I think that anything's possible commercially. We'd like to do it in a way that wouldn't upset too many people, but at the same time, the realities are that we've got to compete.
Thanks, Stephen. You mentioned marquee player there, Steve, and obviously next year there's the opportunity to bring in a second marquee player to the squad. David, if the funds were available, would it be your preference to have another marquee player or sign 2 or 3 more players and have more strength in depth? I did say if the funds were available. Yeah.
What we've got now is we've got the base of a very good squad. So for me, it's a case of bringing in not the wholesale change that we saw over the course of the last 18 months. We are looking for stability. What that means is that this core of players will be here, we hope, for the medium term. You add some players who come through our academy, and that will start to happen over the next couple of years with all the changes that have been made there. But of course, right at the top, you're always looking to bring in 1 or 2 top quality international players who can add real value to your squad. And I think that's the model that we're aspiring to work towards. And, you know, I would never say no to a marquee player, I think, is the answer to your question, Duncan.
Okay, do we have a question from the floor? In the middle there, Ryan. Steve, while Ryan's moving the microphone around, there's a question coming from Russ Poole. He says, can we bring back the half-time game of running around a pole 10 times, through a few obstacles, then kicking at goal?
No.
Strangely enough, he hasn't mentioned the big balls, though. Okay.
Thank you. With your visibility of rugby in the UK and around the world, what do we do to learn from successes that have been achieved in other clubs, either here in the UK or abroad?
Who was that? Was that to David, was it?
To anybody. I mean, you've all got different spheres, so I mean, I guess you must learn things from other places.
Yeah, I'll kick off from I mean, I've been sitting on the PRL board for a little while, so obviously we discuss a lot of things, and we meet a lot of the clubs in Europe. To Martin's earlier point, we're not suggesting for 1 second we're the finished article here, but I'll pick on Saracens because it was our last away game, but you know, you go to that stadium and it is what it is. It's 3 temporary stands around a running track and various bits and bobs, and they're obviously trying to move to a more stable base from a nomadic one. So you know, when I go to stadia and look at other stadia, the only things that really impress me, if I'm honest with you, are kind of outside of rugby. But in fact, I was talking about this today to my finance director. If you go to the States and you go and watch a ice hockey game, it's fantastic. You go in and there's a menu of what you can eat and drink, and you can press a button and it all comes to your door, and there's dancing girls and there's music and all the rest of it. I've been here long enough to know that dancing girls and music are probably not going to win me any popularity contests. So there are certain things that you can do at certain clubs, and other things you have to take a little bit of an emotional intelligence and say, probably not here. That doesn't mean to say we'll shy away from anything if we think it's right for a new generation of supporters, etc. I think from other, there's always things that, so if you were speaking to another director of rugby, and David will no doubt talk about this in a second, there are always clubs that do certain things that you quite like. We pride ourselves on having a fairly good player welfare piece. Alex Brown does a very good job on that. There will be certain clubs that do that very well. They do a lot of aftercare for their players, or a former players committee might be particularly well at let's say Northampton, for argument's sake. And you look at those things, and like most good business people, it's quite often to go second, better to go second than first, and see who does it well and emulate that. And I think we've done that. And David and I, we speak often about wanting to be a top 4 club in everything that we do. So there's most of the things that happen, you guys obviously don't see. A performance chef at the training facility. Hartpury College is a wonderful facility for us. The conferencing and events things that we do here, the way that we try and communicate with supporters via our media channels. So we try to be a top 4 club in everything that we do. But yeah, there are certain aspects of certain clubs which we might sort of say, well, their website looks quite good, for example. Maybe that's something that we should look at. And the clubs are very open to those conversations. We work very closely with the other clubs, or pitches or stands or wherever it might be. So that would probably be my answer. I think David's going.
I think within England, there's always discussions ongoing between DORs. We meet on a regular basis. There's personal friendships outside of that, so you're always comparing what we're doing with what they're doing. But I think from our point of view, what it comes down to, Laurie's come from a very successful experience in the Brumbies. I believe in Ulster, we got very close to being successful, but built that up over a few years, so we know what success looks like there. We've brought in Hines from the Crusaders, Tom Marshall from the Chiefs, Jeremy Thrush from the Hurricanes, and the All Blacks. These are all people who've been involved in successful environments, so that's why their feedback is so important to us. We're not going to agree with everything they say, because as Steve said, this club is unique. This club has certain things that have a point of difference that makes it attractive to players, to people to live where it is geographically. But for me, the secret to success, a lot of the little things round about are nice things to have, but the best teams have the best players and the best coaches. My challenge, my job, is to get the best players and the best coaches in place to deliver us success out there.
Martin, email question that just come in for yourself. Was that really you in the shed on Saturday? And had you got lost?
Yeah. It was me in the shed. I was in the shed on Saturday, and I wasn't lost. I've always spent at least one game per season in the shed, and I used to be able to go over there very incognito, and nobody recognised me, and it was obviously fine. Now it's getting a bit more difficult, but I love it over there. It's a great place to watch rugby, and I will continue to spend at least one game a season over in the shed.
Good to hear it. Do we have any more questions from the floor? We're running out of time now. So Ryan, gentleman over on the far left, far right.
Thank you. Can I just go back to the attendance thing again? I'm just wondering how much influence we actually have over TV, particularly during the Challenge Cup. I mean, the first 3 games, 3 out of the first 4 games of our Challenge Cup campaign were on Thursday nights, and potentially, if our group had been a lot tighter, we possibly could have had a 5th or 6th game on a Thursday night. I mean, what influence can the club have on that, and how do they feel about it?
But we feel the same as you about it, clearly. We have no influence on it, is the straight answer. We enter into an agreement with these TV companies, and effectively, we get remunerated so we can invest back into the key areas for the club. But the answer to it is for us not to be in the Challenge Cup, to be quite frank, because if you're in the Challenge Cup and you're Gloucester Rugby, you're the biggest fish in the pond. So they are going to slot you in on the Thursday night because you'll be the biggest draw. So that's the answer. even Fridays and Saturdays and Sunday games, we don't get any say in it, but we understand that, that's the way it goes, and depending on where you are in the league, you'll get shown more than ideally you'd like to get a balance. So if we're on television every week, that affects my attendances pretty dramatically. But if we're never on television, then it affects my sponsors pretty dramatically. So a nice balance is what you'd like, but we get very little say on the whole thing. But yeah, if you're in the Challenge Cup, there's always that spectre of Thursday nights hanging around you, and it's good for nobody.
David, a question about the academy online. Obviously, there's nothing more than we all love than seeing local players breaking their way into the Gloucester first team. How do you feel? What sort of health do you feel the academy's in at the moment?
As we said earlier, over the course of the last 18 months, there's been quite a big turnaround in staff in the academy. I think the changes have probably started to bear some fruit already. This year, our under-18 team were unbeaten in their group stages, got through to the final. They unfortunately lost the final of the under-18 academy team. But it's not just that, it's also the impact that they've had at A-team level. Again, our A-team are they undefeated? They're undefeated so far this year. They're likely to get into they will qualify for the knockout stages. And what we've talked about, the club to be successful, the team, the professional group to be successful, needs that success at every level. It needs that success so those players who are part of that know what it means to be successful. But it's also important on a week-to-week basis, going back to that earlier question about the squad, how the squad are feeling. If players are getting that opportunity to play regularly, not just play, but be playing and part of a winning team, that reflects on how they then turn up for training whenever we're preparing to play out in the Premiership. So, look, our academy will be here long after we're gone. The easy option for me, the easy option I guess for Steve as well, would be to all our money that becomes available is invested into marquee players, it's invested in the senior squad. I believe our job, as well as getting success out here, is making sure that we are building those foundations in the club that will develop players to go on to represent Gloucester and hopefully England.
Thanks, David. We have time for a couple more. Ryan, just to your right there. Thank you.
Evening. Just a couple of points. Can we have our cherry and white post back? Is one point. Another one, how does the club feel about players like Matt Kovacic in particular being called up to the England training squad and then back again and back called up again, being messed around, and then people like Ross Moriarty being touted to play in Wales if he wants to get in the squad? How does, do we have any influence on that? Do we talk about them and try and do we have any say? Could you stop, for example, Matt playing or training with England if it's messing his training up, or for the club or for England?
No, we can't stop him, but nor would we want to stop him. As I said at the start, we want players here who are hugely ambitious for Gloucester, who are hugely ambitious to represent their countries, and that's the category Matt falls into. He's in a difficult stage of that progression at this minute in time where, as you said, he's up training with England, but that's the way, as well as performing week in, week out, as he does for Gloucester, he's got the opportunity when he goes into camp to impress Eddie Jones, to try and push himself closer to selection. So, look, that's part and parcel of November during the Autumn Internationals, it's part and parcel of the Six Nations. Those same players will then go on the summer tour, again to get an opportunity to train and play with the best players in their respective countries. So you can view it as being disruptive, but it's something that we know is there. From the in terms of the media around Ross last week, look, I said it in the press conference after the game, I thought it was disappointing that the Welsh management actually name-checked Ross Moriarty. My point was it's slightly disingenuous of them to say so. He got picked for Wales based on his performances here, so if they weren't watching him, how did he get picked in the first place? The second point is that, look, I understand that Wales want their players playing in their country, but if you look at the list of players that are now playing in the Premiership, that's why we believe the Premiership is the best league in the Northern Hemisphere. We believe Ross, who is committed to the club on a long-term contract, we believe that he will be very successful at international level based on his performances here, and he's happy to be here, he wants to be here, and look, I have no doubt he's a huge future with this club, but also with Wales.
Okay, we've time for one more question. Who'd like the honour of the final question? In the middle there, right.
I've been trying to think of a political way to ask this, but I'll just go ahead. Was the Mitsubishi logo on the home shirt an afterthought? Because it's Kind of looks like it's been stuck on.
Well, it obviously had to be stuck on at some stage, but right. No, it wasn't an afterthought. Anybody works with businesses, all businesses have brand guidelines that they work towards. In this instance, the Mitsubishi 3-diamond logo has got has to have a clearance around it. Unfortunately, that doesn't look spectacularly good on a hooped cherry and white shirt, but it has allowed me to segue into another way to answer this. We are sitting down at the moment with Mitsubishi, who have actually held their hands up and said, look, do you know what? We think it's a fantastic playing kit. It's great you've gone back to a really traditional look in cherry and white with the black trim, black shorts, black socks. Everybody loved that. And they are speaking with us at the moment about readdressing their corporate brand guidelines to enable us to have a more aesthetically pleasing kit. And, you know, that's really brilliant from, you know, they're a great sponsor anyway, but for them to look at it, and they're not just looking, you know, my gut feel is that we'll be able to deliver on this, and then you guys are going to have to help me out when we do change the shirt and people start saying we're profiteering, changing the shirt again. But we will be doing it for the right reasons, because we do think it's a great kit, and but we probably didn't get that bit right, and it was for no fault of anybody's. Fantastic. If you're in my position, fantastic brand, great deal for the club, great deal for them, but that bit didn't quite work. So just watch this space, and I think you might be pleasantly surprised. Okay.
Thank you, Stephen. We've rattled through 90 minutes. Time's absolutely flown. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much for attending tonight, everybody. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your ongoing support of Gloucester Rugby. Thanks to the players who turned up, to those who've been watching online, but of course our biggest thanks are to our panel this evening, Martin St Quintin, Stephen Vaughan and David Humphreys.